welcome to Legally Speaking. With me, Tarun Nangia. A wise bureaucrat once said that in pursuit of taxes, if one acts like a bee, where one takes the nectar out of the flower but leaves a lot to the flower itself and its beauty and health intact, that would be a wise way to tax. There is another way to tax where you crush the flower and take out the whole essence out of it, but then there is nothing left. I think any wise government would be of the view that they should act like a honeybee and not like a crusher to crush it for once and take whatever is available. That is why we discuss this issue today, which is of the decriminalization of GST offences up to a certain extent. Why this is important? Because there should not be fear in the minds of businessmen when they go about their day-to-day business that they might be raided for offences and be asked to pay huge amounts of money upfront, and on the condition that the GST department will refuse to issue them a notice but ask them to pay money upfront, putting enormous pressure on the working capital of the company. A case in point is the recent example of huge number of traders in the state of Uttar Pradesh who directly approached the government, the chief minister's office, to urge the GST department to stop the raids because their business was being affected. The government swung into action and the raids were stopped. So this is grounds up action, but some good thing is happening. The GST Council is going to discuss this issue of decriminalization of GST. We have amongst us today an eminent panel. We have with us Saket Dalmia, who's chairman of the PhD Chamber of Commerce. And Saket Dalmia also met Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, and he discussed this issue with the Honorable Finance Minister. And of course, he'll share with us what happens after that. We have with us Mahesh Agarwal. He is managing partner of Agarwal Law Associates, which is India's leading litigation law firms at the Supreme Court of India. They also do a lot of GST cases. I have with me Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari, an arguing counsel at the Delhi High Court and the Supreme Court of India, who routinely takes up a lot of these matters. He's also associated with the PhD Chamber of Commerce. Pleasure to have both of you. At the outset, may I request Saket Dalmia that in the first 2 minutes, if you could lay the ground before I move on with the discussion. Over to you, Mr. Dalmia.
Thank you so much, Tarun, for having me here. I think the most important point is that the government today is very, very responsive, or rather responsive, and wants to listen. On ground zero, what's the problem? Even at the AGM, when Mr. Piyush Goyal came himself, he called out to me on the public platform and said, Saket, please get together collectively with various chambers and come to us and tell us how can we decriminalize you guys. So there is the first good step is that the government has understood that for the sake of better laws, for the sake of better enactment of laws, they have been very, very harsh. What that has done is there is an element of outreach, and now they want to amend it, and they want to make it realistic, trader friendly, customer friendly. My recent reactions with the Revenue Secretary, my interactions with the Finance Minister reverberated the same. They asked us for suggestions. They heard us patiently. And we emphasized that, for example, we are 150,000 members at the PhD Chamber of Commerce, 70% are MSMEs, several of them are micro. So to abruptly and to push forward with very, very harsh laws in terms of putting people in jail is not going to help commerce and be very, very arbitrary. Okay. And we have requested that. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, please complete before I go to the other panel.
So I think to sum it up in a small way is that we are saying that please do not consider anybody to be a fraud till that intent is proven. Allegement should not be the basis on which you put anybody in jail to begin with. There should be intent of fraud. And secondly, there's a lot of procedural hassles with GST, especially with duopoly of GST at the state and at the center.
Yes. Okay.
Because of that procedural, yeah.
Thanks.
Procedural hiccups are possible. Yeah.
Yes, procedural hiccups are there. The issue of threshold of raids in GST offences is there. I'll go across to Mahesh Agarwal, managing partner of Agarwal Law Associates, for his opening comment.
So I feel for India to achieve the $5 trillion dream, it is critical that businessmen can heave a sigh of relief. They are not working under threat. They're not working under pressure. and they can carry on business with normalcy. Just now, what is happening is that there is a presumption. If there's an evasion, there's a presumption that somebody has done it with an intent to evade. That presumption leads the officers to straight away go for arrests. The amounts are very low as of now. The thresholds are very low. The officers have been given a huge power. What is good about this government is the flexibility. They have come out with a new law for GST. They have come out with these issues. They have seen the problem being faced, and they are echoing it back and trying to make a change. So that is a very welcome step by the government to accept that what has happened so far is very draconian and some changes are required. That is definitely helping business.
Thank you. Thank you for that opening comment. I'll go to Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari for his opening comment today.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Tarun. Tarun, I think that the fact that the government of the day is now looking at actually decriminalizing this whole offense and creating bringing in the necessary amendments to show that, for example, from 5 crores raising the threshold to 25 crores for an arrest is very welcoming, because this shows that there is really an intent to decriminalize and to make provisions like arrest, detention, raid more strict, and only in those cases where the amounts are really large and where someone really needs to act quickly. That really helps in boosting confidence. Do remember, Tarun, that we live in a world of special legislations now, whether it's the GST, whether it's the PMLA, whether it's the Benami Act. All these legislations have the right intent with their criminal provisions. But the issue is that these special legislations give copious amounts of discretion to officers. And as you know, that copious amounts of discretion to any human being, any officer within a statutory regime can be used and misused. And therefore, it is very important that when a lot of discretion is given and power is given, it has to be sparingly used and used in the right kind of cases and not the wrong kind of cases. And that is what the business community wants. No one is saying that in the big cases where there are big scams, where there are big evasions, officers should not act. Rather, business community wants that officers should act in such cases and recover whatever is due to the exchequer. Because if they don't, then honest businessmen suffer if dishonest businessmen are allowed to do business without any impunity. But what business community doesn't want is that in small and minor cases, which can easily be compoundable, where people can go and have done it, as Mr. Agarwal rightly said, that where there is no real intent of willful evasion, but where there is more of kind of inadvertently or because of some issues they've not been able to do it, they should be able to compound their offenses. They should be able to sleep well at night thinking that, look, even if I've made a mistake, there is a solution to my problem. So I think the fact that we are looking at decriminalization now with these reforms that have been suggested by the GST Council, I think it is very welcoming.
It is welcome, but there are 2 points that emanate out of it. Point number 1, that when these raids happen, there is a fear or a terror in the minds of the businessmen. So when you go for a raid like the income tax, should there be a committee that should assess whether a person, whether to go ahead with the raid? Should a single officer have the power to decide whether to raid a businessman? Or like the income tax, there should be a committee of 3 or 4 officers who vet the file and said, okay, in this case, we go ahead for a raid. Because when you have a single officer doing it, then it is on his wisdom. At least in a committee, you have 3 people or 4 people deciding whether to raid a particular person. I'll go to Saket Dalmia for his input of this.
Very good question, Tarun. I think it's not about one or many. I think at no instance should a person, if they are coming to your premises, need to arrest you at all.
Okay.
No matter what the financial offense is, why arrest? What is the rush to arrest? I don't think so. Anybody can just enter and suddenly find that this person has done something fraudulent. And if they do, they can call them to their office. They have not run away. It's an establishment. So I think this entire access of power of going and arresting should be done away with. You can always prosecute, but don't arrest the person. I think that's the biggest problem, because if the threat of arrest is there, one or many, a businessman will succumb. It's so easy to, misuse that power.
You made a very fair point. Why arrest at all? Because we see in be it the United Kingdom or the United States of America, there is a provision of heavy penalties, but they don't arrest. You pay a fine, you pay a compounding fee, and you get off. I'll go for this to Mr. Mahesh Agarwal, managing partner of Agarwal Law Associates, for his inputs on these two.
So I would go a step below that. I would say not just arrest, but why raid? Raid is a very defamatory word. If a person is raided, immediately, if a listed company is there, the stock prices go down. So many shareholders who are affected, employees are demoralized. The word raid should just evaporate from a businessman's dictionary of fear.
Yes.
Nowadays, in all these transactions, the entire evidence is either documentary or it's electronic.
Okay.
It's impossible to change. It's very simple. If any information is received by a taxing authority that there is some kind of evasion, there can be a proper notice, there can be a reply, a person can be called for questioning. But where is the need for a raid? There is no need for a raid, according to me. Arrest is far ahead. Now, what is happening is that most of the cases in GST, it's a new law. There are interpretation issues. I interpret it differently, you may interpret it differently. The tax authorities are themselves not clear. The fact that a tribunal passes an order on a particular issue and the Supreme Court can reverse it means two views are possible. If there are two views possible and because of it some tax has been retained, doesn't mean there's an intention to evade. So therefore, most businesses which are genuine, they have been working for a long time. Nobody wants to evade just to cheat. Now there is a clear difference between tax planning, as we know, and avoidance and evasion. If a notice is issued, a show cause notice issued, answers are given, consultants are consulted, at that stage someone can come to a conclusion that there is deliberate evasion. So therefore, according to me, that fear of raid must go.
The fear of raid must go is what Mr. Mahesh Agarwal is saying. And one quick comment before I go to Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari. Mr. Agarwal, India has primarily promoter-driven businesses. We rarely see a corporate setup where, operations have totally been outsourced to professional management. In such a country, to just pick up the businessman and throw him in jail, do you think you're actually making businesses collapse? Because every signing authority for every check is almost, for even small amounts, is with the promoter in many businesses, as we have experienced. Your inputs on that?
It definitely affects a businessman's psyche to expand and grow.
Okay.
Everybody is working in a particular scale.
Yes.
New taxation regime has come. There is everybody has to employ so much new staff to study and implement the law. It is not simple. Hundreds of forms have to be filled up. So much paperwork is required. There is lack of clarity. Genuinely, people make mistakes. Now, because of mistake of a peon clerk or a person who's filling up a tax form, the promoter is arrested straight away. At the end of the day, what does the promoter say? I don't want to do business. And that is a result where we see it's there in the newspapers. So many people have left India and become NRIs. That's not good for a country.
Because of fear of prosecution, basically.
Fear of prosecution. That fear of prosecution.
Abhimanyu, in your last answer, you made a point interestingly. You said very well-meaning laws, GST, PMLA and Benami Act. I would like to point out to you, and I want your opinion on this. Many times I have seen a police case is filed on a businessman. The ED starts investigating him thereafter. Then he is investigated in FEMA violation. Thereafter, he is investigated by the SFI. And he is providing documents to these 4 or 5 agencies. His only job in life is to provide documents to agencies, though they can share documents amongst each other, but he is running. Do you think this also needs a relook? Because, GST is there, and then these are these offenses that, every agency just clamps down upon a businessman. Can he ever run his business after such an investigation is launched?
Certainly not, Tarun. And that is a big question. Mr. Agarwal said that we need to get over this fear of raids, and raids is an old draconian term. We don't need raids in an environment where there is electronic evidence and everything is documented. So the raid is not going to give you anything because you anyway will get everything from the documents and the transactions, chain of the transactions. There is one more aspect, Tarun, and this is what exactly your question is about. What happens is that all these acts, and especially GST Act, you can always summon an officer of the company. Now, if you start summoning directors and key employees and tell them, make them sit whole day in the office to answer certain questions, which can actually be sorted by just asking for information and documents. You don't need to summon the individual to come. Because if an individual goes and spends the whole day with one officer in an office and waits for his turn to come, and then he's asked for some questions or for some documents, and he goes back to get those documents, he spends a lot of time just running from one agency to the other agency or one department to the other department. And if they don't come, then of course coercive action can be taken against them. So every businessman will go there and spend the whole day there. Now, please appreciate, I think a lot of this calling a businessman to your office can be sorted out by just requesting for the document that you need, and asking that that document be provided to the office. A lot of man hours and time is spent for businessmen to fly down from one state to another state, or from their plant to the office of the concerned officer, to come and just appear there, when really what they want is the document. So I think that one systematic change has to be brought in all these acts, including the GST, where officers should be told that where you can ask for a document, just ask for a production of a document. Don't summon the person to appear personally in the office. That's one. Second, Tarun, I think the solution to all this is that, look, in a business, in any business environment around any civilized world, businessmen may inadvertently be on the wrong step of law. There are interpretation issues also, right? I may feel that I've interpreted the law correctly. The department may feel that the law has been interpreted completely wrongly. So there may be inadvertent errors made. There may be certain wrong judgment calls taken. Now, therefore, it is very important that we start moving to a regime of compounding. And that is very important, where all kinds of offense, whatever be the magnitude, can be compounded. Now, under the GST, the compounding, if I'm not mistaken, is 50% of the tax amount. I think there is some the council minutes say that they want to reduce it to 25%. I think we should further look at reducing that significantly more. Remember that in FEMA violations, when RBI came out with the whole compounding mechanism, which is there in FEMA, the compounding fee is much less, a fraction of the transaction value. But of course, that is not tax being collected, that's transaction. So there, of course, the numbers will be different. But we should really think more positively of bringing this down further, because then what we will see is that many businessmen, rather than fighting on the interpretation, whether they are right or wrong, and they may just say, okay, I'm compounding, you may be right for now, and I'm paying this extra 10% or 5%, and please let me go off.
Point well taken.
Something more we should think of.
I'll go to Mr. Saket Dalmia. Now, Mr. Dalmia, you represent the backbone of India, which is the MSMEs. And they form what you can say, what our economy consists of is millions of SMEs. I want to ask of you, in your interactions with Honorable Minister Piyush Goyal and the Finance Minister, what has been the feedback from their end, and what do you hope to achieve with these interactions? And is there a demand list that you have that you would like to share?
Fair points, and I think a lot of this really the background is, if you think about it, when the GST came into being, what was the pain point of the country? That business was not being captured in the organized sector of the economy. They made the GST very tight, very stringent, because they wanted to capture the business of the economy. Same thing when Mr. Abhimanyu just now said, that many of these laws were first framed when government was thinking that business is not being captured in some way to get that business also to the formal side of the economy. There were a lot of roundabout ways which are being done by business. Today, world has changed. You'll see India is doing a lot more business. Our GST numbers are higher. So a lot of businesses come into the formal part of the economy, even on the smaller side also. Yesterday's discussion at the RBI panel, I was surprised to know that even, the people who are selling food on the street are registered with banks, small banks. So a lot of business is being captured now in the banking system. So we have achieved that. The government understands that. And now what the government is saying is, okay, now we are not so much worried about onboarding these people to come into the formal side of the economy. It's not a cash-driven economy anymore like before. Things are being done in the formal way. So they are receptive. Now they say, okay, now come and tell me, what should I do? So I think to sum up important points from Maheshji and Abhimanyu, same thing, that nobody is running away. His or her business is being captured in the business they are doing. Call them, make them sit across the table, make a sensible discussion out of the problem, and they understand it. They're saying, okay, tell us where the laws are there, which are problematic. Tell us where the threshold levels are there. For example, when we spoke about the threshold being shifted from 5 to 20 or 25 crore rupees. And to reverberate what Maheshji was saying, that don't break. And what Abhimanyu was saying, I have friends who are billionaires, one sons, and I asked them, what's the plan for your son? They're like, I don't want to bring him back to the country. I'm like, why not? I said, because he says, my company is becoming larger. I do not have direct control over my day-to-day company's business activities. Somebody else is looking after it. One small trip, and they might just summon me and harass me, and suddenly I'm a prosecuted individual. So this needs to go. I told it clearly to them, and they really appreciate it. I hope it translates into better law, which it will eventually, but hopefully sooner the better, so that these things can be done away with to create the environment to be better. Even the small people are so scared. They're so scared that somebody will come and raid me. Why should that be? And as Abhimanyu said, that if there is a financial mistake, take a financial charge and make it sensible. Make it hurt, but don't let the person die.
Point very well taken. I'll go to Mr. Magesh Agarwal for his wish list. I would like to ask him whether a committee should decide on raids. He said raids should be done away altogether. Do you think that's even possible in India, given how the country functions and there is a certain mindset of the bureaucracy? So suddenly to change it, is it possible? Your wish list before we move ahead.
See, raid should only happen if there's a credible information that a person is running away or is destroying evidence. Oh. Just because you get some information that some tax has been avoided, that should not be a reason to raid a person. There has to be some information that some criminal activity has taken place, some intent is there, and the amount is staggering. So that should be the point at which one should decide to raid or not to raid. Second point, insofar as compounding is concerned, what is compounding? It is an incentive to settle. You tell the promoter that you have a choice, that you keep fighting for 5 years, and you may have to pay interest, penalty, interest on penalty, and prosecution. If we give you an incentive to settle now, please do it. The promoter takes a call that it's in his interest to get rid of an issue. What is important at this stage to educate is that compounding does not mean admission of guilt. It should be made clear that just because a person is compounding doesn't mean that he's admitting he's committed a fault, because then it becomes a shareholders issue, it's an issue for the directors, and it's an issue, a slur on the company forever. So it should be highlighted, and there should be a proper education that by compounding you don't admit guilt. That is one part. Second important part is that today there's, as you know, there's a ongoing debate on pendency of cases.
Yes.
So compounding is something for the future. But insofar as past is concerned, if the government is taking such a positive step of coming with a scheme of compounding, it should apply retrospectively, and there should be an amnesty for the past. So where cases have been going on, whether they are at appellate stage or even at Supreme Court stage, an incentive should be given to close those cases also. So for the past and the future, and we can have a healthy business environment.
Thanks for those inputs. Over to Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari for his wish list.
I think my wish list is, as I said previously, is that we should bring in a regime where cases can be settled between the assessee and the assessor. That is, that they can go out there and without admission of any guilt, go and for once and for all pay what they want to pay and finish it. And I think that there could be, we really need to think whether we need to bring back what was before there in a more new avatar, the Settlement Commission, because there are a lot of these old pending cases which are there. Do appreciate that, as Mr. Dalmia said, now we have a lot of small businessmen and a lot of the unorganized sector coming into the realm of this whole act. And they also want to now come into the realm of this whole act. So there will be a lot of teething issues. So therefore, probably for the next few years, we need some kind of a settlement commission, which will be a bit more dispassionate from the officers who are doing the daily nuts and bolts of the GST Act. And any businessman could approach that commission, and that commission could immediately order a complete stay on all action against that business, and then call for a couple of meetings and in a time-bound manner find a settlement figure which could be arrived at so that one could just pay and finish it off without admission of any wrongdoing. So yes, I echo with what Mr. Agarwal says, that when compounding is a good regime, but the compounding, the negative thing is that it kind of connotes that you're admitting to guilt. Yes. So therefore, of course, we need to have a process where we can go pay and get out of it without admission of any wrongdoing or guilt, so that it doesn't have any more issues that may come up from it. Because you don't know, tomorrow I go and I admit I've done something wrong and I pay for it, I'll have some other agency coming with me, but there you've admitted on a document that you've done something wrong. So now they're going to prosecute you for something else. So one doesn't know where this ends. So I think there should be some kind of a settlement commission regime that should now come in, so that there are these past legacy issues which can be sorted out. And as we become a more formal economy, it is there for a few years when India migrates from a large sector from an informal economy to a formal economy. So we urgently needs a commission.
Thanks. But one good output of this discussion is that first, Mr. Saket Dalmia, the president of PSG Chambers of Commerce, had a meeting with the Union Finance Minister, also with the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal. He's had good assurances that they're looking into this. Tomorrow is, of course, the GST Council meeting. I will request this panel to reassemble post the meeting, and we could do a post assessment and a wish list, because all decisions, of course, can't be taken tomorrow. There will be much ground to cover. And I think those discussions can be held after the meeting. And of course, what we, in a sense, achieve after this meeting, we all remain very hopeful to what can be achieved. But I appreciate that Mr. Saket Dalmia, the president of PSG Chamber, could make time and join us. We also had Mahesh Agarwal, managing partner of Agarwal Law Associates, Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari, who also is associated with the PSG Chambers of Commerce. Appreciate your joining us, and thank you, viewers, for tuning in.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.